And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. And welcome to Miami View, where you stay informed and inspired. My name is Yvette Harris, and I'm one of the co-hosts along with my awesome co-host, Carolina Castillo. I'm trying my
Hello,
Spanish.
everybody.
And our amazing special guest, who I'm absolutely so excited about that I'm nervous to mess up her last name, but I know I'm gonna let me see if I can do it. Her first name is Nzingah, powerful, and she's going to explain to us later in the show what that means. And her last name is Oniwosan. I think I might have got it all right. And she is a health and wellness consultant. She's a plant-based chef. She's a yoga instructor, and now she is an app developer. We will be talking to her about her new app, 365 Zing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But first, we're going to just talk about some hot for South Florida and our country today. What do we have going on? So let's talk about
Pay.
So yesterday, equal pay. Need more women who make more money, right?
Absolutely. I think definitely COVID had a huge impact on women. And yes, every year we talk about equal pay. Every year we're saying how Latinas and Black women are in the bottom of equal pay. But let's get real. COVID really had a huge impact on women. 2.5 million women out of the workforce, taking care of their kids, doing virtual learning. It really had a huge impact. So now more than ever, equal pay is much more important than any other time, that we've been living. So that has to change. And it starts with us.
Yep, it does. And I think this year really put a spotlight on it so than ever. And I'm looking forward to that change. I'm looking forward to making some more money.
Yes.
Spring break. Do you want to go about that?
You go.
We were going to do
spring break, and I'll put back on you.
Rapid news fire here. Spring break, Miami Beach. Carolina Nzingah. I'm emotional about this one.
I'm losing you. I'm sorry. Break. I don't know if. Yes.
Spring break is every year in Miami Beach. And there is a tank. There are horses. There are just things that don't necessarily come out or happen when other people are visiting Miami Beach. It's to me, it's a disgrace. I used to come here when I was in college for spring break, and I never welcome as a Black person. Ladies, as to what or how you guys have been keeping the news, or how you're feeling. You think that the beach is doing enough to welcome people, to offer people, the students, solutions to what they can do while they're here? What are you feeling before I let you know what I'm feeling?
Listen, I'm feeling that there's a lack of leadership in Miami Beach, commissioners, mayor, everyone, okay? Because at the end of the day, they had no planning. They had no structure. It wasn't organized. I mean, when they have the Food and Wine Festival, it's organized. When they have a concert on the beach, it's organized. So what happened with spring break? The only thing that they said is don't come here. So what are a bunch of kids supposed to do when they come to spring break if you don't have a plan? And that's what I'm angry about. I blame the leadership 150%.
And this has been going on for long. Just this year, it's not just last year. This has been going on forever, and we really need to apply the pressure to come up with a plan and to make sure that this does not happen again in 2022, or actually Memorial Day weekend.
And I want to hear from Nzingah.
Any thoughts?
Do you have any thoughts?
I do have thoughts. My boyfriend lives on the beach, so I've seen the influx of people, and I would say that it's complicated. I think COVID really played a big factor in the number of people who come here for spring break, and that everyone who's here is not in college. So like some of the people who are here are people who just took the opportunity because we're doing remote working as a result of COVID. And so there's a mixture of crowds. And I don't think, I definitely feel like there should be more planning on the leadership side of things, but I think COVID just created a pot of a lot of different factors that led to what we're seeing now. I wish we had better ways of creating opportunities for people to do things that didn't involve the use of alcohol and other types of drugs. And I think that's the conversation that needs to also be had, just in terms of society in general. You know, like, because a lot of things happen when you're under the influence. As someone who has a background in neuroscience, frontal lobe is what is your inhibitor, right? This is the area of your brain that tells you to not do certain things. But once you have alcohol, that completely goes out of the window. And so, you know, Florida is also a tourist country. We've been greatly impacted by the fact that we haven't had people coming in. So when we tell people not to come after we have this big impact, we're also impacting the service industry. And as someone who is Haitian, I know that has a direct impact in Haiti, where a lot of the people who are working at the hotels on Miami Beach, who are working in the restaurants, if they don't work because restaurants are closing down, because they don't want to have to deal with the drama that comes with the people coming in, then that has a direct impact on a place like Haiti, although a lot of people don't think of it in that kind of way. So it's very nuanced for me, because I'm looking at things from a bunch of angles.
Yeah,
when it comes to it.
And you brought up a really good point. COVID, right? So it's like the perfect storm. Everyone around the U.S., let's just say, are quarantined, don't have this open state like the governor has. No mandates, right? No mask mandates. Everything is opened. It's party time. Kids are having cabin fever. And we all knew it. We all knew that spring break this year was going to be insane because of COVID. Yeah. Precisely because of COVID.
The weather's beautiful here. It's so cool.
Absolutely. Yes. And so everywhere else it's cold, everywhere else it's closed, the whole thing. There's no rules or regulations. It's practically lawless. And that's why, because of the governor. And then all of a sudden, you have all these kids. I agree with you in regards to alcohol and all of that stuff. And I want to blame the kids, but I don't fully want to blame the kids, because at the end of the day, the city has a responsibility to create some form of events or appearances, or in a safe environment that involves closing streets down, getting police officers, training police officers, instead of being so aggressive, just to organize, just use police officers to organize, not to throw pepper bombs, whatever the case may be. If that would have started right from the beginning as an organized situation, it would have never ended the way that it did, which, militarized and threatening, and I think after Floyd, it's changed everything, because there's this no fear for police officers, and then there's also police officers threatening. So if it's organized from the very beginning without the threats, and the city has control of its own city, then it wouldn't have gotten to this point, my opinion.
Can I add, I keep saying kids, but as someone who's spent a lot of time over the past couple of weeks on the beach, and I've been watching spring break stat-wise, the number two cities in the nation for spring break are actually Orlando and Fort Lauderdale. And we don't see the same issues in those places. And again, when I look at the people who are coming to Miami Beach, they are people who are unless they're on like a 10-year college plan, they're traditional college spring breakers. And the thing that we haven't touched on is once the CDC imposed the rule that you have to be tested in order to come back in the country, most people decided to come to Florida because we're the closest thing to a Caribbean or Cancun experience that doesn't involve you going out of the country and having to deal with the nuances of being tested before and after to come into a specific country. And that once that law took place in February, I immediately saw an uptick of people who are coming to Florida. And that's played a major factor in it. And I don't think the leadership really took that into account because they didn't know that the CDC was going to make that rule. And then people still have cabin fever. Because we keep saying students are having cabin fever, adults are having cabin fever.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Miami Beach, the beach, the coconut, the palm trees, everyone wants to come here, you know? And so there's a collision of factors that have led to what we're seeing right now.
Yeah,
and
sorry, go ahead.
That change in that rule by the CDC really shifted travel and started bringing everyone to South Florida.
Right.
You know
so
what?
that brings us in.
On the other spectrum, we also saw more guns. So this is the other side of it, right? We also saw more guns. We saw a rape. We saw, I think, a senior getting groped in her. We just saw a lot of crime as well. So I think that lawlessness was also a huge factor, especially for the residents of Miami Beach, Florida.
Right. And just to note that they did notice that a lot of that took place were not necessarily all coming from others, but they were local people, you know, which has always been a challenge. And for me, I always think that it's those things have acceptable. Never on the news show the people, like during the day I went down, people were walking, people were enjoying, people were going into the restaurants. You never see the full picture in terms of what's really going on spring break. All you see is, you know, the and I'm not saying that you shouldn't show that. But you need the fair coverage so people understand the full of it. But we can't spend too much time on that because we got to go to gun control. We got a lot to cover. And Zing is going to have us living our best lives. So let's talk about gun control. You want to? Carolina,
I want to talk about the anti-riot bill that passed today in Florida, which I'm livid about, which actually is an anti-free speech bill that goes against our First Amendment rights. That is a really terrifying bill, to tell you the truth, because the violence, it increases the stand your ground laws and increases the attacks on protesters. It is just, I feel it's anti-democratic. The other thing that, the other topic is gun reform. I'm a gun owner, and the gun reform needs to happen. There's been 7 mass shootings in the last 7 days, and we believe in gun reform. Gun owners believe in gun reform. And the other one is Georgia's Governor Kemp passed huge restrictive laws. The moment Georgia went blue, guess what? The Republicans got angry and they passed huge restrictive laws in Georgia, voting restrictive laws. So I'm having a moment today. I have to tell you, I'm having a moment because this is a lot. This is a lot for one day. And that's why, like you're saying, you know, Nzingah's energy and her life story and her resilient story is so perfect today, because there's too much negativity, and I need some positivity from Nzingah. I really do.
Yeah, you are amazing, you know, and you know I don't say that lightly. You're a plant-based chef, you're a yoga instructor, you're a health and wellness. You developed your own app. Like who to wake up and you about to close that disparity gap that Black women have when it comes to health and wellness. A little bit about yourself, your story, and what inspired you to create the 365 Zing, which I love.
So, you know, sometimes great things are birthed out of tragedy. And in that case, specifically with me, that definitely was what was going on. And there is an African proverb, I don't know it verbatim, that says oftentimes a healer is confronted with a health crisis. And that's how they're marked as a healer. And so my health crisis started when I was 12 years. Well, it started before that. It started when I was like 10. I was suffering from childhood obesity. I was pre-hypertensive. I had severe allergies and hay fever. And later on, I was like a year or two later, I was then diagnosed with a brain tumor. And because I was being diagnosed with that tumor, as they were trying to kind of understand what was going on, and then they discovered the brain tumor, I then got diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome. Followed by a year and a half later, I also got diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder called scleroderma. That was a more difficult diagnosis, and I think in part it was because I was Black. I was being treated in a different way because they didn't understand the nuances that were going on with my skin, and no one thought to think that it possibly could be a autoimmune disorder. And just, I mean, in my journey with my autoimmune disorder, I've had doctors tell me that there was nothing they could do for me because I was Black. And so when I say I want to close the health disparities that we see in Black women, it's because I've been a victim of what that looks like in terms of treatment, diagnosis. I will say that I am more fortunate than a lot of my counterparts in the sense that most women with my tumor have what's called a prolactinoma, don't get diagnosed until their late 20s, 30s, or 40s. For instance, my mom actually has the same tumor, and she didn't get diagnosed until she was in her 40s. So she spent most of her life possibly with this tumor and didn't know until, she was asking questions about having breast milk. And then finally, she ended up at the same endocrinologist I was at, and then they did some tests and discovered she had the same thing. So I was told I'd have to be on medication for the rest of my life, which was disheartening, as a child, because essentially at the time I was still a child. I was being confronted with my mortality. It's like, oh, okay, so I might not live for a long time. There were questions about whether or not I'd be able to have children. And that was very jarring. But at the same time, I was always asking questions, I think just because of the nature of who I am and my interest, because I wanted to be a physician. So when I got to college, I felt like I could own the process. It's very different when you're a child. Like the questions you have and the alternatives aren't necessarily something you can execute. So my sophomore year in college, I did a little bit more research, and I felt like a holistic practice could be a way for me to address the symptoms that I had as a result of my diagnosis and the things that I had going on. Here I am 20 years later on the other side of that journey. And it wasn't easy. A lot of times people see me in the now and it's like, oh, you look really healthy, agile, especially when they see me doing yoga poses. But the journey was very difficult. The journey was difficult in one place is because holistic medicine or wellness was specifically not very accessible when I started. We're talking about the year 2000. And then I didn't often see practitioners who looked like me. Like yoga was one of those things that I did to reverse some of the symptoms that I had. And I don't think I saw my first Black yoga instructor until about 5 or 6 years ago. And when I'm speaking of women of color at large, sometimes that point of entry is really important. They need to see someone who's in the same position as them, who looks like them, and understands the context, the cultural context of what they're dealing with possibly at home and the nuances of that. So for instance, as a vegan chef, I've had women who follow me on my Instagram account, Yes Baby I Like It Raw, who said they followed me because they found out I was Haitian and they knew my food had to taste good, And so I think sometimes we take that for granted, that representation matters, because then people know that, like, well, if they're doing it, there's a possibility that I can do it too. And so I built the app because it's very difficult to find all of this information in one place. if you want to do meditation, you have to go to one place. If you want to do yoga, there's another place. If you want to do West African dance, there's not even really an app for that. If you want to take wellness courses, a lot of those wellness courses are not necessarily designed with that cultural context in play. If you want to track, then that's another app. And so it's just like all these multiple apps, and it just doesn't make it easy for your shifts in health towards a better practices to be sustainable. So I wanted this app to be able to make wellness sustainable, but to also build community where we know that there are other people who are on a similar journey and we can cheer each other on. So that's my journey. It's a lot more nuanced than that, because I wanted to build this app like 6 years ago, but I mean, like the ups and downs and twists and turns to get there is a whole different story in itself.
What was the process to actually building an app? Because I mean, your background didn't necessarily align you with apps, right? So what was the process for you? Great question. So initially I was going to hire someone to build the app for me, but I got a quote for $20,000.
Whoa.
And the reason why is because I wanted it to do so much. Then I asked for some support that didn't necessarily work out. And so I knew I was going to do it, but I just needed to shelf it. I had some people who were interested in being like seed investors, like pre-launch, but I didn't feel comfortable with that. And so then I looked at a couple courses, and there was one particular course that really resonated with me from Tara Reid called Apps Without Code. And so COVID pandemic offered me the space to actually take the class. Prior to that, I don't necessarily know I would have had the space and time to really deep dive. And initially when I signed up for the course, my schedule like ramped up and I had to put it on the back burner. But then once my schedule slowed down, I was able to then like really deep dive and build out the app that I have today.
That's amazing.
You're a woman of many talents. And I can tell by your story that you're also very resilient. Tell me how was growing up as a young child? So I have an 11-year-old. I know Yvette has a 12-year-old daughter. How was it growing up as a young child and being so resilient? Where did you get that from? Your mother, your dad, your family? Were they supportive? Because to get to the point where you're at now is incredible. Did you have mentors or family that was supporting you during your hardship when you were growing up?
That's an interesting question for me, because when I was getting diagnosed, there were other things happening that made that period of time in my life very challenging. One of which was my mother was suffering from, she's manic depressive. She has what's called bipolar disease. And so very shortly after I got diagnosed with my brain tumor, she started to have her episodes, and that didn't allow her to be as present as I needed her to be. And in some ways I had to become parentified, which means that our roles became reversed, because when she would have depression, she wouldn't feed herself, she wouldn't get out of the bed. And that became something that I felt I had to support her in, making sure she ate and make sure she just did her basic hygiene. So I think that made that time a little bit darker. With other things that were going on, my father was away, and he was away for like 2 to 3 years out of the country. So I would say that there was a period of time I felt really broken. A lot of times that we see each other, we see the story on the other side of the story, but there are moments that I honestly had a very big issue with God, if I'm honest. Because at the time I was very religious. I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, and the way that God was being presented to me, I just felt like God was punishing me and I hadn't done anything that warranted all the things that I was dealing with. So in terms of resilience, I honestly don't like that phrase, because it's a phrase that's used for people from my culture, which is I'm Haitian American, and because I feel like it doesn't give space for us to be vulnerable and to have breakdowns. So I will say that I am like a phoenix. I had to have a breakdown, and then I rose from the ashes, and I am who I am now. And so there wasn't this constant like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it no matter what. There's definitely these moments where I was like, God, I don't think I want to live another day because this is just really overwhelming and this feels really unfair. And I don't have anyone here to support me with the trauma that I'm dealing with right now. And so if I would say I was resilient at that time, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think I was vulnerable. I was weak. I was depressed. I was sad. And I wasn't allowed to even show those feelings at the time. Because culturally it's just not allowed, especially as a first gen only girl, firstborn. So, I had to show up and, put whatever I was dealing with to the back burner. And so when I talk about 20 years ago, I flipped the switch because I literally had I imploded, where being an overachiever to compensate for whatever I was dealing with on the inside just came to a crash. And when I came to a crash, I was like, okay, I've dealt with a lot of trauma and I haven't had time to process that. Therapy looks like a great answer. 2, I have these health conditions and I feel like my stress has definitely played a major factor into it. And when I started to seek assistance from holistic health practitioners, they told me that very thing, So when we say resilience, I wasn't resilient because when I went to a Chinese medicine doctor, they said that my autoimmune disorder is a result of fear. And that's a disease that's birthed out of fear. And so that's why I don't necessarily like that phrase. I feel like I've transformed, and I'm now thriving. I don't like the word surviving either because that phrase means that I'm still like stuck with the past and going back and forth.
Do you like every day Shiro? Do you like the word Shiro, that you were your own Shiro and that you were your own person and your own support, even though you broke? Like you pretty much told me you had no support. You were the strength. You were the strong person who just thrived, as you're saying. Do you like the word Shiro? You don't like that word either.
As long as I give credit to the people who were there for me, there are some people who planted some seeds in me before life came to an interesting space for me. And there were definitely people who guided me when I decided to take this wellness practice and live this holistic life. And so I am the product of a lot of people and their work to be wellness practitioners to help people come on the other side. And that even included someone in college who saw that I wasn't thriving because my grades slipped one semester and asked me what was going on and helped me get the therapy that I needed. So like definitely there were always guardian angels around who would check on me, and the collective people who saw my potential, but also knew that there were things that might be in the way or needed support to sift through, showed up when they were supposed to show up. So I had fairy godmothers and fathers who showed up when I needed them.
So why the name 365 Zing?
Sure. The name 365 Zing is because wellness isn't a 1 day, 30 day, 7 day process. It's you doing a little of something all year long and finding what makes you vital. So Zing, although it is a play on my name, actually means vitality. And so it's, how do you find vitality 365 days in the year, So, or 366 if we're on a leap year.
Right.
and personally, I need help with that. So I was so eager to meet you because last week I ended up in the ER room with a pain in my stomach that was horrific. I thought I thought I was going to have to stay overnight. Everything. They did a bunch of tests. At the end of the day, I think it's intestinal, and it's how I'm treating my body, how I'm treating myself, right? And the thing that you're saying is 365 days, we really don't take care of ourselves. I don't think I'm mindful of taking care of myself daily. I mean, if I would be mindful of that, I wouldn't have ended up in the ER room last week, right? And now going to see a gastro
I think she froze.
Okay, I thought that was me.
So we'll definitely come back to her. Can you talk community aspect of it in terms of the app?
Sure.
That the women have access to?
Yeah,
are you back?
Sure. She's back.
Are you back?
Yes, I was going to ask, and I'm sorry about that. I'm having issues with my internet.
No worries. No worries.
What would you recommend to someone like me that needs help in taking in self-care daily, to be mindful and to really focus on that?
Sure. So, excuse me, one of the things I forgot to mention, and I want to make clear, is I believe that wellness is not just physical, it's a holistic practice. And so we're looking at your spiritual, mental, physical, mind, body, spirit connection. And a lot of times when we see something manifesting physically, it's related to us maybe having a disconnect mentally or spiritually. So when I say doing things mindfully daily, it could be taking 5 minutes in the day to meditate, taking a moment for whatever your spiritual practice is, finding stillness, because we do a lot of doing, and so then we think that's the same remedy that we need in terms of our wellness. But a lot of times with respect to our wellness, we need to subtract, we need to take away, and we need to stop. So I'm really big on rest. I'm really big on creating a space for awareness so that you can do check-ins, so you can hear your body's cries and things that they're telling you it needs or doesn't want, so that you don't end up having it have to punch you in the face and send you to the hospital. And if we're specifically, so in holistic wellness, you know, a lot of times emotions are related to specific organs and things like that. You know, with that gut area, that's really related to our emotions in a very strong way. You know, our vagus nerve runs from our stomach up to our brain, and it's very connected to our flight and fight experience. So as you're trying to navigate what things you need to eat to help support your gut, you also want to look at what things are you holding on to emotionally that you need to release. How are you moving through your fear? How are you creating more joy in your life? A book I like to recommend, because I feel like it's a really great book, is Fiber Fueled. And it really talks about how important our gut is in relation to our health. And so down to how we feel emotionally. And so most Fiber Fueled, FUELED. And there's a 4-week plan in that book, and it's by a gastroenterologist.
I love this. This is awesome. I mean, you blew me away when you're talking about the gut and emotion. That's a big aha moment. So thank you for that insight. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're telling us in terms of the community aspect of it for your users. Talk to us about why important item for you and what that looks like.
Sure. You know, the community portion is really important, because if you feel like you're alone and you don't have someone on a similar journey as you, the success rate drops tremendously. And so because, again, the goal is sustainable practices, I know that when there's a community involvement, you can interact with people on the app, then you can actually be more successful in whatever your health goals are, because everyone has different health goals. So how this is done is when we have an accountability matching. So just like you'd be matched on Bumble or another dating app, you get matched with someone who has a shared goal that they're working on, and then you can set up how you work on those goals. So right now I know of a pair of 2 women who are doing their accountability work, and they've established a time every day where they meet and they go through their checklist. Have you done this? What have you not done? They go through their journal questions together. And that's like, yeah, this is what I wanted to happen. The other part is we do have a place where women can share, just like an Instagram feed, but it's built within the app. And then we have courses that are small groups where the women can have a more intimate relationship with each other. So one of the courses is actually happening right now. It's called Exhale, and it's a course for mothers. In that course, they're taught to have how to deal with the challenges of being a mother and everything else that comes with that. And so I definitely know that they've become a
pandemic.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I know they've become a really close niche. They've become really close with each other because they've taken, this is a 6-week course. Next week, we have another course that starts, which is 6 weeks to holistic wellness. So I expect that group to also have some type of synergy as well. So those are the different ways that happens, through the courses that are live, through the courses, and then through other aspects of the app.
So what are some of the top things that you do for your own self-care?
Awesome.
Do you have some favorites?
I do. Meditation is definitely something that's really important for me. I am a multifaceted person. And so, and when I say that, like, I can do a lot. And so my brain is always like, so I need meditation to give my brain a break. And so that meditation is a really important practice for me. Another practice for me is actually breath work. Breath work has been really important for me because it helps me to take myself out of fight or flight. People who've experienced trauma are they're more likely to go into fight and flight quickly. Their threshold is lower because of whatever, especially if you've dealt with trauma as a child, your threshold becomes lower. And so small things that wouldn't impact someone else can actually send you into fight or flight, or can even trigger you. So breath work has allowed me to take control of that fight or flight response. And yoga is definitely something that I do daily, either a very hatha practice, but one of the things that I love now is I've found a more restorative practice too, because again, I'm living in a world that says go, 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 and I need a practice that allows me some balance. So restorative yoga has definitely been like my more go-to yoga. And I think that's a lot of times when people go to a yoga studio, they're expecting a restorative practice, and that's not often what they receive. So restorative yoga has been my go-to. And of course, eating awesome foods and drinking enough water those are like my main go-to. Say that again.
Item to cook. Your favorite item to cook.
Oh, that's hard. That's so hard. Favorite item to cook or uncook. I'm going to say uncook because I do a lot of raw food. I think smoothie bowls are like my zone of genius. I love a smoothie bowl. So smoothie bowl is like ice cream for breakfast. It's made with frozen fruit. The main fruit typically that's frozen is bananas, but then like the world is yours, especially when you start adding like these superfoods on top. It's just like heaven. So I love smoothie bowls, but you know what? Wow. I like to make vegan desserts too. So my favorite dessert to make is this pineapple coconut pie.
Could we get the recipe to that? I love pineapple.
It's a secret recipe, unfortunately. That's the one recipe I don't share.
I'm gonna have to stick to the smoothie bowl.
Say that.
Just let us know when you're gonna make it right at your house.
You know, I actually it's a recipe that I've been selling for a while, and I gave it to a friend, and she's like, no, forget yes, baby, I like it raw, just package this. So that's why I'm not sharing it, because that's kind of in the works.
I love it. You know, I want to also hear, since we talked about your personal life, who right now at this moment, at this time, is your rock?
Who's my rock? That's a great question. I have a consortium of rocks. You know, I don't have one person. I don't have one person I lean on, because I want to practice what I preach, and I don't want to make someone my everything. So I have family, friends, partner who are there. They check up on me, make sure I'm okay. So yeah, I could name all of those people, but that list is it's a lot of people to name.
I love that, because at the end of the day, it does take a village, right? It does take a village, starting with ourselves, and then having all of that amazing energy around us that we are blessed to really have. And the last question I was really curious about, and I know all of this is very personal, but I'm so curious. So you said something at the beginning that was really impactful. You said that you had an issue with God, and that stuck with me. And I want to know where you're at now spiritually with that feeling in your soul.
Sure. Yeah. There's some people who say, well, God made that happen so that you could be the person you are today. I don't feel like God works like that. I don't like that answer because I only touched a bit of my trauma. There was other events that happened that might be triggering. That's why I didn't mention them. And so I actually practice a traditional African spirituality, and that has brought everything. It's more holistic. It makes more sense with me. It resonates with me in a better way. And it's helped me reconcile some of the things that I had issue with in the religion that I was practicing as a child. And so I definitely don't hold that same position that I held when I was a child, when I was dealing with a lot of things that I was dealing with.
What is that African holistic called?
I'm a Khan. A Khan.
How do you spell that?
A-K-A-N.
A-K-A-N.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I feel like I've learned so much from you today. And that's why we do these shows, really. And you're just such an example of a strong woman who at the same time is willing to be vulnerable and share. And I appreciate you. I really do in sharing. Any advice that you have for young ladies? There's a lot of young viewers. We have a lot of interns that work with us. Any advice that you have for them now?
Sure. I would say don't let your past dictate your future. I think a lot of times when we're younger and less wise, but we have like what I call the 20s arrogance. We hold a lot of the things that we have experienced as it relates to trauma against ourselves. We see it as baggage, and the world doesn't necessarily see it as that. And, just do what you need to do to heal so that you can shine. And someone needs your story. They need to see you on the other side of whatever negative experience that you've had. And don't be afraid to step into your purpose and your power. I know a lot of times, particularly as women, we're taught to be small. We're taught to be in the background. Don't be afraid to be loud. I remember as a child, I was the loud kid. I would always answer questions and ask questions. And I literally got in trouble for being loud. But here I am, loud. And I'm just happy I didn't allow those experiences, because I literally remember my mom came in for a parent-teacher conference. You know how they have the night where the parents would come in and they would talk to the teachers, and the teacher was just like, she's too much. Like, she just needs to sit back. And my mom gave me this lecture, and it made me feel some type of way. But I'm happy that I was able to push beyond that, because I could have been a very different person than I am now, had I let that experience dictate how I show up in a room and show up in the world.
Wow. Right.
Amazing.
So I have, before we have you share with the audience all the contact information, what if you're just stuck? What if you know that you need to do some self-care, really take care of yourself, know where to start? Like, you just have no clue. What do I do first? What's the simple thing that I can do to start on a daily basis? What would you say?
That's hard. Okay, I have a 100 days of self-care challenge, which is free, which is on my website, which is yesbabyilikeItraw.com. And there's weekly prompts to help you figure out what self-care looks like for you, because I don't believe self-care is one size fits all. Different people have different needs. So when I spoke of my mother, the self-care that she would need to do is getting out of the bed and just doing basic hygiene. So I would say having a moment for stillness to check in. And so that moment for stillness to check in will allow you to figure out what you need in a bigger sense in terms of your immediate self-care. So that check-in could look like, I'm going to write down in a journal how I'm feeling and what I need. It could look like maybe some meditation, and those thoughts that we try to throw in the background might be giving you the answers that you need. Sometimes those thoughts are actually good. Maybe doing a video journal if writing, you have trauma from journaling because somebody got your journal when you were young and now you don't feel comfortable with writing. I think just having that moment of stillness where you sit with yourself, like really sit with yourself, the bigger answers that the person is looking for to get unstuck will come. But it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable to sit with yourself, especially if you've been running and hiding from yourself for an extended period of time. So don't turn away from whatever shows up. Look it in the face, and one minute turns into 2 minutes, turns into 3 minutes. So don't feel like you have to conquer the world overnight in regards to your self-care. So that could just be like, you know what, today I'm going to be still for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to give a big shout out to Miriam. She was just writing in the comments. Miriam is our producer. She's in the background. She was our co-host before Yvette. And Miriam said, yes, start small. And I think that's how I work too. I need small in order to conquer everything, right? So like eating that elephant, you don't eat, you know, when they ask you, how do you eat that elephant? People are like, I can't eat an elephant. And then, yes, you can, just little by little by little by little. So thank you so much, Nzingah. And I want to give a shout out to Yvette on her second show. You rocked it, girl. Ow! Girl power.
Positive vibes of you both.
Our listening audience.
Yeah,
from both of you today. I started all strong and angry with everything that's going on in politics, right? Which Nzingah made me see it's my gut, my emotion. And now I'm like, yes, I feel strong and powerful. And you girls are just amazing. You women are amazing. And I just thank you, Yvette. You did great. Nzingah, thank you so much for being here. But our time is up.
How can one download your app? Where can we find you? So do you have anything coming up that anyone can attend? What do you have going on? How can our audience?
Sure. So first things first, don't go to the App Store to download the app. I opted not to join the app stores because they charge you money. And I'm like, why am I giving them money to help to do something that they didn't contribute to? So if you go to 365zing.com and you go to the pricing and plans section, then you'll be able to get your download. Other events, I have some retreats coming up. I just solidified the dates on a retreat in December that is going to be in Antigua, and we will be glamping. We were supposed to glamp last year, but you know, life happened. I have some dates that I'm solidifying for Bali as well, as soon as Bali opens their windows, but I'll also be doing some stuff here in South Florida. So just sign up for the email list that's you'll be prompted on that website, and you'll get all of that information. And you can always follow me on Yes Baby I Like Her on IG as well for more information, tips, and recipes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Last shout out I want to give is to Camila, my daughter. She painted this. It's kind of like macarons on a table. She envisioned herself in Paris because she's got cabin fever because of COVID, right? So Kami Art Life, just wanted to give her a big shout out. She's always here listening to our shows, and she's a big contributor to our show. Every week we have a new painting from her. So, you know, I mean, that's part of what we do is uplift not only our daughters, but all our daughters in our community. So I thank you both. Thank you, viewers, for joining in. Besitos a todos. Gracias.
And for those of you celebrating Passover tomorrow, blessings to you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you for being here. Woo!
It's Friday.